New U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East is already on his way to that war-torn region. George Mitchell was dispatched by President Obama today. Meanwhile, in Syria, Palestinian factions met to forge new strategies, and pro-Palestinian protests popped up in Europe. But the residents of Gaza have their hands full, putting their battered lives and neighborhoods back together yet again. Relief efforts began in earnest. Large vehicles packed with badly needed aid rolled across the border from Jordan earlier today. In the UK, two TV networks, Sky and the BBC, were severely criticised for refusing to broadcast an emergency fundraising appeal for people in Gaza. The networks voiced concern they'd be perceived as taking sides in the conflict, which so far has killed more than 1,000 people and inflicted heavy damage. The aid groups included Oxfam, the Red Cross, and Save the Children.
This row about whether or not to air the appeal is overshadowing the real issue here, which is one of the worsening humanitarian crises for the people of Gaza.
Nonetheless, groups like Médecins Sans Frontières have managed to set up a mobile clinic in Gaza where surgeons can take up to 20 patients a day. Hospitals in Gaza were undersupplied and overwhelmed by the heavy influx of casualties. An estimated 4,000 people were injured in the three-week offensive. The CBC's Peter Armstrong spent the past few days talking to people in Gaza. Here's his look inside that battered territory.
Gazans are a notoriously resilient lot. People in the remnants of this village are all the proof you'd need, returning to homes and lives left in shambles and getting right down to business. Our house was here, he said, pointing at the shards of cement. We're setting up a tent instead. What else can we do? Next door is the shredded hulk of what was once the home to the Abed Rabo family. We were told the house was destroyed by Israeli tank shells and that 12 members of the family were killed. The rest fled looking for shelter. Over the weekend, they returned home, surveyed the damage, found the one room still inhabitable, and moved back in. If I had the money, he says, I'd rebuild everything. But there is no money, so they'll live in the ruins.
On this street, every single house was destroyed. And this is just one neighborhood. There's others like it across Gaza. When you see the sheer scope of the devastation here, you can't help but wonder, where do you even start to rebuild?
The answer is wherever they can, bit by bit. Already, they're beginning to piece this shattered city back together, working night and day to repair the damage. With this pipe in place, half of Gaza City will have functioning sewage for the first time in 3 weeks. Everyone is pitching in, doing what they can to clean their corner of Gaza, but the task at hand is simply overwhelming. International aid is already being pledged by the millions. But Israel and much of the West say the money to rebuild Gaza must be given to Hamas's rivals Fatah and the Palestinian Authority.
The government will not accept this financial support by any side, will not be accepted to be a source of blackmailing, political blackmailing.
At the United Nations headquarters in Gaza, the warehouses are still smoldering after being hit by Israeli tank shells more than a week ago. The UN's top official here worries the bitter rivalries and intractable political divide will make it all the harder to get aid to those who so desperately need it.
We've had enough now. We've had far too much of violence. As we see from the United States of America, change has come. The people of Gaza, they desperately need change as well. And it starts with an end to violence and then the restoration of a dignified existence for everybody here.
But it's hard to see how the rebuilding, not to mention the ceasefire, can be accomplished without at least some Hamas involvement. Hamas has emerged from the 23-day assault intact, battered perhaps, but still in charge. The Islamic group still refuses to recognize Israel or renounce violence, but this senior advisor says it's time for Hamas to have a seat at the table.
We accepted the pre-1967 border as for the Palestinian free and independent state. What we can give more concession than this. And I think this is the time that the world community put pressure on Israel to accept this offer, not just to keep talking about peace.
Hamas is hoping its mere survival here, coupled with a new administration in the United States, is a chance for it to claim a legitimized role in Palestinian and world politics. But amid the rubble, that's just talk. What people want, what they need, is help. And their priority isn't which Palestinian faction claims credit for getting the money to the people. Otherwise, nothing will be done, he says, even if it rains money. For now, though, they'll make do. Gazans, after all, always seem to find a way. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Jabalia.